Big money moves are happening in crypto right now. Bitcoin just hit a key oversold RSI level, the same setup that marked the previous market bottom. Whales are scooping up Bitcoin, exchange reserves are dropping, and even Michael Saylor is hinting that the US government may be buying soon. Meanwhile, macro market conditions are shifting very fast. The dollar is weakening, oil prices are down, and European rate cuts are also coming. Add in PMI data flashing stagnation, and we could be looking at a perfect storm for Bitcoin to explode higher. So in today's show, we're going to break all of this down. Bitcoin and altcoin charts are signaling a very bullish breakout soon. Also, how whales are positioning themselves and why macro trends are setting us up for a massive Q2 rally. So let's get into today's video. Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm so happy you're here. Like and subscribe if this information is useful to you, and let's get started. Okay, so starting with Bitcoin's price, you can see that as of the time of the video, today, as I'm recording, Bitcoin's at 89,000. It's wanting to break out towards 90,000. Just a few hours ago, it was at 91,000. So we know that Bitcoin has indeed been trying to rally up, push back up, and we have many reasons to believe, I have many reasons to believe that it's going to be pumping very, very soon. We know that the crypto summit is the first crypto summit ever is on Friday. So anyway, let's look at which key macro conditions are going on right now in the market, as I was saying in the intro, that lead me to believe and lead many smart money whales, big holders of Bitcoin, real true believers of Bitcoin and its fundamental value. It leads many people to believe that Bitcoin's going to be pumping. So let's take a look at this. And then next, as we can see on the daily, according to this is not a chart, it's a bubble chart, I guess, but we can see that the market has been reacting quite bullish. All altcoins on the daily anyway have been up, many of them, the good ones. As I've said in the past, when the market, you want to pay attention to the tokens that pump, that go up in value the fastest after correction, right? It's like the check mark sort of look. Pattern. So anyway, let's keep going. So the market's reacting bullish. That's sad, as we read here by Caleb Franson, and he's an analyst. He basically shares this chart with us, and it basically signals to the fact, or let's just read what he has to say. He says, this is what the chart looks like every time Bitcoin's daily RSI has become oversold over the past 5 years since the start of 2020. And this signal, or this setup, so to speak, just flashed 7 days ago. So what do we do with this information? So this basically tells us that Bitcoin sold too fast and that the current price that we see reflected, as I was showing you a moment ago here, is not a true and accurate reflection of what should be its actual fair price, fair value. So it signals towards a good buying opportunity, because it means very likely Bitcoin's going to be bouncing up from here. And then next, negative funding rates on Binance. That's what we are seeing right now, which is also a signal of the fact that the market is very likely going to be pumping from here. Basically just means that short sellers are having to pay long traders, those that believe Bitcoin's going to be pumping. So anyway, it basically signals to the fact that there's more selling pressure in the market right now in comparison to what is being purchased. So anyway, it also signals to a good time to be buying, because it signals to the fact that Bitcoin is very likely going to be bouncing up in value and in price. And then next, we have Miles Deutscher here also validating this with some more information, basically stating that the amount of BTC, or Bitcoin, held on exchanges has been declining over the last 2 weeks, which always tells us that people, and mainly long-term believers and holders of Bitcoin, are removing their Bitcoin from being able to be sold or traded. That's what that says. They're hodling, they're holding. So this is also a very, very good signal. As he says here, it's a sign of confidence that investors were buying the dip and moving their Bitcoin into cold storage or into safety, right? And then, okay, so like be adding all these things up in your brain as I go through it, because here we have a clip of Michael Saylor on Fox Live on their news segment. Basically, I'll just play it for you, but he basically says that because we know he's advising the US on its Bitcoin strategic reserve, which many believe will be announced, like the details of it and the confirmation of it will be announced this Friday. So tomorrow, depending on where you are in the world. So let's take a listen to what Michael Saylor has to say.
At Friday's roundtable, strategy co-founder and executive chair Michael Saylor is here. You should have the most prominent chair, the one with the armchair with the arms on it, because your company owns more Bitcoin than any other company. What, about 500,000 tokens?
Yeah, about 2.4% of the worldwide supply.
2.4%. I guess
Let's
wild.
just get your view, because everybody's dying to know about the summit and what they think is going to be announced. How do you think this crypto reserve will be financed?
Well, I think that there's a 6-month process that's been laid out by the executive order, and I think the president was fairly deliberate in that. There are 12 members on the Presidential Working Committee. There'll be involvement from the industry. There'll be involvement from the Senate and from the House, and it's above my pay grade to decide how it gets determined. But the Lummis bill has laid out the idea of acquiring Bitcoin strategically over 4 years,
Over 4
consistently
years.
day by day. In
So
order to
dollar
reach a
cost
billion
averaging
Bitcoin
in.
target.
Okay, the government has 200,000 Bitcoin, as I understand it. We equal about 17 billion at today's prices. So to get up there, how they would have to purchase Bitcoin, right? So as the government purchases these Bitcoin and other tokens, what is that going to do to the price? I mean, supply goes down, the price goes up.
Hello, it's gonna
Well, the
pump
most
it.
responsible thing would be to go slow and steady and deliberate with clear telegraphing and transparency so that
I just found that part a little funny because Strategy, or his company, formerly known as MicroStrategy, buys and scoops, buys several hundred Bitcoin at a time. So I just find it funny that he would advise the US government to buy slowly, to just dollar cost average and basically like just buy slowly when he's doing the opposite. But of course, we all understand, I understand that there's a difference between a private company that can be more aggressive versus the government that has a fiscal responsibility to the nation. And so it's far more responsible to buy slowly. But in the best interest of the US, I think it would be in the US's best interest just to buy as much as possible, because at this point it's a nation state race. All the countries of the world, Saudi, just everywhere, like everyone's buying. And they're buying aggressively. They're not going to be buying slowly. So if the US buys slowly, and I feel like Donald Trump knows this. Many people in the crypto part of the crypto council know this. Michael Saylor knows this. If they don't buy aggressively, they're going to get left behind. Everyone's going to buy it all up. So I don't know about that part, but we can keep going. The point is the US is going to be buying between up to about apparently 1 million Bitcoin for its reserve over the next, and apparently it's going to take about 6 months to enact. That said, we have heard there is a proposal out there to use the US's gold reserve to buy Bitcoin. So I don't know where that's at. I can look into it if you want. Let me know in the comments. But that would be very interesting, because at this point, I don't think anyone even knows if all the gold that is in, where is it? Like Fort Knox. They don't even know if it's all real. It may be counterfeit. Like, how do you know if the whole gold bar is real? So anyway, moving on and taking a snapshot of how the market is doing right now on a macro level, you can see that the ISM, which I asked Grok here on the side, you can see what it stands for. It stands for the Institute of Supply Management, and it's the organization that compiles data from all the purchasing managers' indexes, and it's basically used to gauge the manufacturing like well-being of the US and the service industry, which pretty much makes up most of the US's economy. I had to do a little research on this. But apparently what is really interesting about the data that you see on the screen here is that this is the data for February that we just came out of. The actual information or the actual data was at 53.5, whereas it was previously, and I don't know how this range, like is determined. But apparently, the actual data shows that we're at a 53.5, whereas expected, like everyone expected this one indicator to be at a 52.5, and it was previously at a 52.8. So basically, the point is the actual data came in better or higher than expected. And apparently, anything over a 50 is considered good and healthy. It speaks of a healthy economy, an economy that is stronger than expected. But what sort of is a stark contrast to it is the information you see below here, which is the ISM non-manufacturing prices. And the prices, this is different. This actually speaks of inflation. And you can see that the expected number was 60, and it was previously at 60.4, and it came in already at a 62.6, which basically indicates and speaks of inflationary pressure. So like inflation. So while this is not the best news because inflation's not good, it means the dollar is losing its value. Ultimately, it's a good thing because higher inflation data or pressure will and could push the Fed to cut interest rates to alleviate some of this pressure. That said, we also see that the US dollar has been weakening to its lowest level in comparison to the euro in the last 4 months. So the dollar is tanking, which is also a good thing. You may not think so, but when the dollar is tanking, this tells investors, this tells invest somewhere else. Go invest in something that may actually give us a return instead of losing our value. So this actually provokes a situation where investors then go look to put their money in risk on assets, which Bitcoin and the crypto market is definitely considered so. So it's a good setup to think of it that way. And then we have here a comment by Jim Cramer, which frankly, I thought really long and hard about sharing this tweet, but I decided to share it because at this point, I think Jim Cramer is an indicator all of his own. We know there's an ongoing joke. If you've been in crypto, you know this, or if you've been in markets, you would know this. But if you haven't, like basically whatever he says, the opposite happens. And so that's why I believe he's an indicator at this point. And he basically kind of frowns upon or says that, he thinks that Commerce Secretary Lutnick, that is optimism on the effect of tariffs might be misplaced, as I highlight on the screen. But it's so funny because then, of course, like the opposite of what he says more or less rolls out. And you can see here by Kobesi letter that the US is now considering a 1 month delay on the auto tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So I find this so interesting because it really gives us a sneak peek as to President Trump's negotiation tactic. And of course, that's the way negotiating goes. When you want 10, you ask for 20. And this scares the opponent, and then they're like, meet you at 15, and then you can push for 12. And then eventually you get to your 10 that you always wanted. I don't know, I'm just making up a number, right? So it's interesting to see that while he was so adamant on, and he said it publicly, I played a snippet in my yesterday's video, I believe. So it's very interesting that while Trump was very adamant about saying there was no way he was going to change his mind on executing, on these tariffs against Canada and Mexico, he now says, on the day of, it was supposed to be enacted like yesterday or today, depending on where you are. He now says there's going to be a 1 month delay. So clearly it's a negotiation tactic. Who knows what conversations happened behind the scenes? All in all, I think it's a good thing because it's going to give the market a bit of relief. And it also tells us we have a president that doesn't just do what he says no matter what, because I think a good leader, from my perspective, and I think, there's so many cases for this in so many different, in so many different sectors or examples, that a good leader takes into account and stays very conscious, takes into account real factors as they're happening in real time. And you shouldn't be so rigid as to decide what you're going to do and that's it. Like you should always be present That's the whole point in being present, is that you take things into account as you move, as they're happening. Because if you're so fixed on something, you might make a bad decision because conditions changed. You know, if you're so set on going somewhere, but then it rains or like there's a blizzard, let's put it that way, something dangerous, then you should probably take the blizzard into account and not just go anyway. So it's something like that. Like maybe that was a bad example, but I'm happy to see we have a president that's flexible. And ultimately, we don't know at the same time if this was just a negotiation tactic the whole time to scare Canada and Mexico into doing whatever it is that, basically like shutting the borders, keeping dangerous illegal immigrants out, and ultimately stopping the drug trafficking into the US, because that's a big problem. We know the fentanyl problem is a big problem. So anyway, the point is the market's going to get a big sigh of relief here. So combine that with all the other facts I told you right now. And then here we have Pentoshi. Basically, let me just read it for you. So he says, Trump is a genius. 10-year bonds are dropping, inflation slowing, market dropping. Think we discussed the possibility a month or two ago of him forcing the Fed to take action, right? I just covered this in yesterday's video, I think. Stocks are being sold, bonds being bought, mortgage rates come down, housing market has been frozen, like nothing is moving. I believe it's something like the worst home sale in 10 to 15 years. I could be wrong. This is where we're going with this. That will allow for refinancing mortgages, but also refinancing US debt at lower levels and bringing down costs. Credit card costs, auto loans, housing, you name it, the consumer wins. Yes, your coins went down a bit, but we care more about the consumer than coins, right? Plus, as interest rates come down and as the dollar is losing its value, it's going to make borrowing cheaper, and it's going to make everyone move towards risk on assets. So ultimately, this formula is actually very, very good for Bitcoin and crypto, and good for the consumer and good for everybody. It's going to make life cheaper and easier for everyone to refinance their loans. And because even the US is at a breaking point. That's why the Fed, if you didn't watch my yesterday's video, that's why Trump is pressuring the Fed to cut rates by creating a storm, right? Through this like tariff war and affecting the market. And it's a very, very interesting sort of like chess game strategy that we're seeing unfold before our very eyes. And so anyway, let's finish what Pentoshi is saying here. He says or Trump, right? He simply causes short-term pain in markets, but they have 100% recovery rate. But people lower their costs on debt with refinancing. The US does as well. He slows inflation, gets cuts, which markets are pricing in, and the Fed will have to cut. He's just a 4D chess player. So we're all getting a master class at negotiating. Like if we pay attention to the news, which I hope you are, and follow my channel and like and subscribe. But if we pay attention to the news daily, that's why I'm finding it so intriguing. It's actually a master class at negotiating. And it's just amazing to see a human being do this, because it gives us all an example of what we could also do. Anyway, like expand our potential, it's amazing. Anyway, so he says, yeah, just to relax, basically. Like it's a very nice setup that Trump's cabinet and leadership is setting up for the market. So anyway, moving on, we can also see here by Bravo Research that the US dollar just broke down from a head and shoulders topping pattern. So once again, the US dollar is losing value quite rapidly, and this is great for risk on assets. And I also covered this in yesterday's show, but oil prices are the lowest that they've been since 2024, which is good. As you can see here, it does take a while to circulate through the economy, but there's a direct correlation between gas prices and a thriving economy, because you need gas for everything to move around. If you don't live in the US, then maybe this doesn't make very much sense to you. But having lived there just a few years ago, I can tell you the US is so big and everything really is so far away from each other, depending on where you live, But you need gas for everything. And if gas is more expensive, everything goes up in value as well, because it's harder to get around. It's harder to deliver goods. It's harder to go to work. It's like harder to do everything. So everything goes up in value. So the fact that oil prices are going down is actually really, really great for the economy. And then we also have the European Central Bank also expected to announce another interest rate cut today, and this is following 5 previous cuts since June. And apparently Germany's decision to increase fiscal spending triggered a bond sell-off. So they're depreciating their own money, and investors see this. And so they're selling their bonds, and this is going to be new liquidity that then is also in Europe that is also going to be looking to put its money into something that's going to more risk on, maybe it's not, it's Bitcoin, it's crypto. Okay. Like it's not so certain, but nothing really is certain. And Bitcoin now with the US really like leading the way. Well, El Salvador really led the way, but now making a point to become the leader of Bitcoin and crypto for the world. Pretty sure all these investors are going to go invest in Bitcoin. And that's why there's really going to be a nation state race for Bitcoin, like who can buy as much as possible. That's what's happening. And then here we have Raoul Paul, who's very wise and has his own channel as well. It's called Real Vision on YouTube. Very, very insightful. He sums it up, as I was saying. He says, with the dollar, rates, and oil headed lower, all going down, as I said a moment ago, financial conditions are now easing fast, right? Allowing the market to take a deep breath and lead risk assets by a couple of months. So this is happening at a good time, and it's really signaling, as he says here, for a good Q2 or an April, May, June. A really good Q2 for tech and crypto, and hopefully H2 of this year, 2025. So we're looking at a very beautiful setup. And in terms of dates to look out for if you are a trader, and be so careful if you are, like, please don't trade anything that you need for bills or food or, your overhead and your responsibilities. But if you are a trader and you do have dispensable income that you can afford to lose, because that's how you need to think about it, the key dates to look out for that will be good for trading, if you feel confident enough, would be March 7th, this Friday, tomorrow. We have the crypto summit, and there's also going to be a statement by the FOMC. So, and then we have March 12th with the CPI data, and March 19th, FOMC, the official one. But I believe there's a statement on Friday as well. So this is trader's paradise if you're a trader, but I always like to err on the side of safety, and that is what I will always share with you. But okay, guys, I hope that was insightful. I hope you have a sense of where we are in the market. Very exciting days. And as you saw for yourself, it looks like Bitcoin's really positioned to go up in price here. It looks like the market is really, like President Trump is really setting up market conditions for risk on assets like Bitcoin. So anyway, I will catch you guys here tomorrow. Take care.